Ashened is perhaps one of the most hyped TCG exclusives we've ever gotten, simply for its Dark Souls-esque aesthetic, which is why it's probably also the biggest disappointment in the game's recent history. Now that we have the TCG exclusive patented Wave 2 support that provides no support, it's now in the OCG's hands to make the deck playable. It's very easy to just look at these cards and go, they're shit, then move on, but I actually want to assess the issues deeper than just deck bad Lamau. I might as well preface this now. If at any point I say something where you think, oh, but generic card X fixes that, I'm speaking of the deck's functionality within the context of its own cards and design, as that's how any deck is supposed to be designed. There were quite a few red flags from the outset when it came to this deck. The first obviously being it's a TCG exclusive. We already have a consistent track record with how well those work out. The archetype itself presents a design issue that I'm shocked no one's talking about. This deck is just Malefic in reverse. For those of you unaware, Malefic is a garbage deck played by the villain Paradox in the movie Bonds Beyond Time. It's a collection of boss monsters throughout the series, but made fucked up and evil. They can all be summoned by banishing the original from deck or extra deck depending on the card. The downside, however, if you don't control a field spell, they die. Ashen has a similar issue, but instead of them dying without the field spell, you do instead. It's one thing to have a field spell be a part of the deck's main game plan, it's another to make it entirely dependent on said field spell to even function. It demands consistent, easy access to the field spell, creating an obvious, highly exploitable weakness. The deck aims to destroy the field spell as well, because lore. The in-archetype way of destroying the field spell is Vados, who is not actually in the archetype, for lore reasons, meaning he's not searchable. The search spell for him and the field spell is also not searchable. Can't wait for the unsearchable search spell that searches the Vados search spell, racking up design flaws left and right. If nothing else, Vados serves as a hand trap for field spell decks. Ashened are all dark despite this being the year of fire, so all the recent powerful fire support like Promethean Princess isn't helping them out. It also alienates them away from having synergy with any other pyro archetype since they're all understandably fire. Though dark does mean bestial or be bestialed. Point is, this type and attribute pairing is already limiting the deck's potential. All the Ashen monsters can special summon themselves from hand if the field spell is live, which would be an alright design philosophy, if only there wasn't a singular normal summon in the deck! Konami has for a while now released archetypes in a state that doesn't function in any playable capacity, selling the parts that make it function later. But these cards really take the cake. All I'm saying is, if these fuckers were warriors instead of pyro, they wouldn't last a day in the War Rock Mountain. The deck is entirely dependent on outside resources to even function, relying on Bonfire, a $100 card that's a required 3 of to play this deck. Because how else are you gonna search for the only normal summon in the deck? Well, by making this new rank 4, of course. You know, with the other 4s in the deck. Pretty good value, I'd say. The first wave also came with a continuous trap, something no one was enthused about. Admittedly, it ended up being more useful than people had anticipated, but it was just yet another underwhelming aspect of the deck's initial design. It's fine. The deck just needs a game plan and a way to facilitate it. You know, the thing you're supposed to start with, but hey, that means all the more easier to figure it out with the second wave, right? By all means, this wave did boost the consistency, but that's about all it did. We get 2 more normal summons, they do nothing to start your plays, so why even bother to make them? Issue still not fixed. Summoner's a good card on paper, but it implies you'll see 3 engrave. That's gonna be entirely dependent on the supplementary engine. Spearhead is ass. I don't think I need to really explain why. Then we have the Vados fusion, which requires 3 monsters, including Vados. He's just a big asshole who dusters on summon and is difficult to out. This design is lazy. I can't believe I'm going to make this comparison, but it should have been more akin to House Dragon Maid. Contextual. House is a card that pops your opponent's monsters whenever a Dragon Maid card bounces, which they all do. Fusion Vados should be doing something that actually facilitates the deck in some way. Or if the deck already functioned, utilize aspects of the archetype's playstyle to impact the game state. But hey, a boss monster is just a boss. We can always print other cards that do that, except we didn't. We printed an easier to make fusion that recycles the field spell. which wasn't really the problem, but hey, it can attack twice. This card has permanently altered the brain chemistry of someone at Konami. Well, maybe we can use Ancient Fairy Dragon and other field spells to get to it. Do something, fucking anything to attempt to cycle in the field spell. The deck's best spells lock you into Pyro extra deck monsters. Let's just look at the number of Pyro monsters in the game. How many of those are in the extra? Now how many of them are worth summoning? The two spells this deck needs in order to breathe lock you into doing functionally nothing with the extra deck, since there's nowhere near the Pyro card pool to facilitate it. This is because the deck's design is teetering on a dangerous axis. Every card is a free special summon, so long as you have the field spell, so any design that leads to cycling too many names to the field means the deck could run rampant with links. And that's without regarding any other outside engine. Though we can't lock the deck out of links specifically, because that'd be an admission that they're unhealthy for card design. Konami will do literally anything to never write, "You cannot link summon" on a card. So now we're Pyro locked, and it's gonna take until they start printing new good generic extra deck Pyros to warrant it. The decision to make the deck suddenly fusion-oriented also means it can't utilize a playstyle like Monarch, foregoing the extra deck for powerful effects that help the deck function. Though the Vados search spell hinted at using the extra deck in some way, since the wording locked you into Pyros rather than out of the extra entirely. They also want you to super poly Vados or your opponent's monsters for the fusions, and I don't really find it interesting design to make a card that board wipes your opponent after super polying them, because what the fuck do you think super poly is? Which is where we get into the new continuous trap. It's an archetypal super poly on field. It also has the effect of manipulating your opponent's typings. Of course, that affects while it's in grave, somewhere the card isn't when it's on the field. The field spell also manipulates your opponent's typing, but only on your turn. You know, the turn this card isn't being activated. Which I mean, fuck floodgates, but you gotta design cards to function. Could we really have not just put the text, "Your opponent's monsters are treated as Pyros for the fusion summon of a Pyro monster"? This way it doesn't serve as an obnoxious floodgate and it actually functions, and it doesn't just make Garura for free. Thank God they printed a searchable Vados search spell. It searches high-level Pyros in general, although it ensures you're locked into Pyros in any deck you play this. One potential issue. It puts the card in grave first before adding it. It's cool that it's like this to give flexibility to add something already in grave, but surely nothing bad can happen between the send and add. With the Vados fusion, it now makes the card searchable through cards like Conscription and Deployment. Conscription kinda sucks. But hey, since Vados is a quick effect, you can search him turn 1, then use him during your opponent's turn. Though, I don't know if the deck will be that desperate enough to play all these cards just to make sure Vados is in play at all times. Rekindling is the one card that, for some reason, I'm the only one defending. It is just Chalice, but it's searchable in this deck. If this deck didn't need to use its singular search on the field spell, and actually facilitated its cost, this is just a good card. But as the deck stands, any card that could be considered good is kind of void, because they don't have anything good to build into. So what do they even need? For starters, now that we've decided to make the deck fusion-oriented, a good fusion, and make it a way to access the field spell. This way Priestess can search cards other than the necessary field spell. Another fusion spell would also help. Extinguished is a fusion spell that has to be in grave to fuse, so you have to use its effect that locks you first. The other fusion card is a trap that can only make Pyro fusions. Yeah, dog, make the new Gaia Synchro, then fuse it into the new Gaia Fusion. That's this deck's real game plan. I'm not saying to just print branded fusion for this deck, but I'm saying perhaps print one that, you know, fuses for its main effect. It'd also help to make a guy that can activate a continuous trap from deck that isn't Vados, i.e. more searchable, or give it a trade-off of, instead of the usual from hand or deck that only exists to prevent cards from being hard garnets, if the card was in hand, it can be activated that turn. This way, if it's already in your hand, it has more use, or you can search the card to then use its effect that turn. That might not be optimal, but it is something you can do, as well as helping facilitate any potential future continuous trap support. You can make a tuner and a synchro for the archetype. Keep in mind that the most common level in this archetype is 4. Maybe just make it another 4 and the synchro an 8. Give the deck one card that doesn't need the field spell to special summon. while also making it spin the deck's wheels. Maybe a tuner that discards an Ashen in hand, or Pyro if we're being a little more lenient, then special an Ashen with a different level from deck. Since other than the 3 level 4s, you have a 7 and an 8, as well as a 9 with Vados, you could also have a secondary condition that allows you to summon Vados. From a lore angle, it could be a protector that prevents Vados' terror and destruction. You can have it special summon Vados when it's banished. If! Word choice. This would represent it no longer being able to prevent Vados' terror. Then you can make the Synchro Monster facilitate the banishing part. While there are a lot of 4s now, one of them is useless, so the deck could still use more in general, especially for Flame Banshee. This way the deck is capable of consistently finding both Vados and Priestess, and not just one of them. In terms of outside engines, you could lean into Resonators as well as the recent Earthbound cards. Hell, Harmonic Synchrofusion would be a cool card to shape the deck around, and making it utilize Synchros and Fusions. That way you'd have to manage all of it before using the Pyrolock cards if you want to summon generics. Then if you're locked, the card still does something even with the restrictions. Duality and Shadow's Light could prop up an interesting design to explore, making light counterparts, but at that point, just give the archetype a mask change, with these serving as extra copies. If this is all sounding like too much effort, just print a Link 1 that searches the field spell. Good old reliable. You could actually be more interesting with it and make a Link 1 that's treated as being the field spell while face up on the field, then have it blow up after you summon an Ashened and give it a grave effect. Except you can't do that, because they chose the specific wording, is in the field zone, so it can't just be on the field. Real great design. So you'd also have to make it place itself in the field zone, and at that point, it might as well just search the damn thing. Fuck it! Go a step further. Power creep Phalanx and Striker, and just set the damn thing from deck so it doesn't fucking lose to Ash. Ashened is unashable. Hallelujah! The one chance you get to make a Link 1 do something with a field spell that isn't searching it, and you make sure it's impossible. Wonderful. Other than all of this, the deck is stuck in limbo waiting for generic support to carry it anywhere. I think the saddest thing about this archetype is the irony that Vados itself may become a lasting part of the game, whereas those he slayed will be forgotten to time, lost like ashes in the wind. But hey, I'm sure people will still find a way to force this deck to do something fucked up and evil anyway. If anything, I just never want to see a deck designed like this again. We gotta stop making decks that live and die by the field spell. It limits what the archetype is capable of doing and makes it very streamlined and boring. Also, we just got a Super Poly deck, and this doesn't really offer any interesting variation of that playstyle. Be sure to comment how fucking stupid and wrong I am when this deck eventually tops in the future. It can't be more stupid than the original title for this series.